Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network, which is brought to you by Miles Franklin. They've been in business selling gold and silver for over 20 years, and I'm a customer because when you buy, they ship. For more information, find them on the web at milesfranklin.com or give them a call at 800-822-8080 and get a free quote. 1490 WGCH. This is Carrie Lutz, and you're listening to the Financial Survival Network. Right now, things are in complete flux. It looks like the dominoes are falling, but we can't see in what direction they're falling in. And if you need some more guidance and some more insight, Martin Armstrong is here with us to clue us in on the latest saga, on the latest collapse, and to tell us about his upcoming book, which I personally am extremely excited about. Read a little bit of it, and it's compelling. Hey, Martin, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.
Always a pleasure, you know that. So you've been busy writing this book, and while you're writing it, I guess everything that you're writing about is happening, right?
Well, pretty much. I think that a lot of the predominant confusion that people have, they expect everything to happen at one time. And it's not. It's like a set of dominoes that one set pushes off the next one and so on. So that's why I wrote a couple months ago and said, listen, guys, the flight to quality is not finished yet. And if we look at what happened really during the Great Depression, as one country goes, capital rushes from one to the next to the next. And eventually it pushed the dollar up dramatically, and all of Europe defaulted on their debts, South America, China. Then you end up with the dollar at extremely high levels, and then everybody else has defaulted, and they say, well, I guess the U.S. will be next, And that's really the way it goes. And there is a big difference between large money and the average individual. The big money is they can't take it out of the bank. You can't go up to a bank and say, "Can I have $10 billion in cash, please?" So they have to put it someplace. They're not the people that are going to go running around buying, Cougarans and stuff like that. So they tend to rush around, and they have to put it largely in government debt. And they've been buying U.S. debt, and that's why we have record lows now on the 10-year. That's why I've been saying that the flight to quality is not finished yet, because they still have Europe in turmoil. You have the French have now elected a socialist, and he's talking about taxing the rich 75%, and you have a massive flight of people trying to get out of France, heading off to Switzerland now. I mean, this whole world is just going completely nuts, and government is in such turmoil, but they will not listen yet. So they're going to constantly become much more aggressive in trying to collect taxes, increasing fines. You're going to see police on the street giving a lot more tickets for anything possible.
Jaywalking in Manhattan, you think it's going to come to that?
Well, I'll tell you, in New Jersey, they've got signs up now all over the place, click it or ticket. I mean, fine, the seatbelt law has been in place for, about 30 years? Now all of a sudden they're enforcing it?
Yeah. Isn't it a beautiful thing to see government get vigilant in protecting you and saving you? Oh, yeah.
I mean, only when it makes them a profit. That's about it.
Isn't that great?
And the interesting thing is that they've realized that they can't give all these people tickets for nonsense. So what they've done is now they're putting up cameras everywhere. And so if you get a camera that takes a picture of your car and you get a ticket, well, you don't get the points for that. You just got to pay the money.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, like, you probably didn't notice it, but, you know, we got, like, guys like Bloomberg who's trying to restrict your right to excessive intake of sugared soft drinks. But while I was reading about that, I'm sitting at this bar and I look around and I'm by Penn Station, and there's a surveillance camera on every corner of 34th Street and 8th Avenue, and it says security camera, and it has a picture of an emblem, a New York City Police Department emblem, and I'm saying, wow, it's really come down to this. We are in the emerging electronic police state, the EPS. And to some extent, we've always had, you know, tendencies towards it, but now the technology makes it so simple to do.
Well, it's really quite frightening in a lot of things, and I hadn't realized we had a conference in Philadelphia in December, and probably half the audience was from out of the country, and they were in shock that they have to give their fingerprints to get into this country, and the U.S. is now building a database on everybody that comes into the country.
Yeah, it's
fingerprint.
It's shocking. I mean,
they're not allowed to do that to an American, but the rest of the world aren't Americans, so we could do it to them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really.
It just really. I don't know. I think that largely there's an economic benefit to this. And in December, they passed a law saying that any foreign company that deals with American and doesn't report what the American's doing, they can be subject to have all their assets confiscated.
Yeah, right.
Now, the bottom line to that is now that an American tries to go overseas and open up a bank account, he can't. Mm-hmm. They won't deal with Americans. Sorry. You know, if you speak English, they assume you're American, and you have to show you have a Canadian passport or something like that just to even open up an account, because they won't deal with you.
Yeah.
And now they're off, you know, and going into Asia trying to accomplish the same thing. And it's just turning into such a ridiculous police state that it's scary. It really is scary. I mean, it'll be absolutely... we give up all our liberty so you have liberty. I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, well, that's that old thing in Vietnam. We had to kill the village to save it. And we're at that same thing here. But so basically we're going around the world. So they go to each country, and then their sovereign debt starts to fail. So they look at the U.S., they look at the dollar, and say, well, eventually it's going to hit there too, but probably last. So they pour their money in. And what about gold and silver in terms of manipulation, price manipulation, in terms of being protection against the government's overreach, at least for the little guy, or maybe for the hedge fund manager that's worth $1 billion, but he could put $10 million or $50 million and buy a ton of gold. Where does that?
I don't know if the hedge funds are going to really be able to do that. The individual probably can. The hedge funds can certainly deal on exchanges, but will they actually take physical gold? I don't think very many will. And you also have to realize is that in 34, when they confiscated gold, they didn't do it. They didn't go house to house, but all the banks that had gold turned it over.
Yeah.
So the institutions, I do not think, are necessarily a safe place to keep anything. And what I do think is that gold will eventually start to take off, but it's in a consolidation mode yet. And I think the real high is probably off around 2017. Mm-hmm. And gold will take off when people begin to realize globally that the U.S. is in trouble as well. And although everything everybody talks about here in the United States and make it sound like it's the U.S. is at the end of the world, we're actually the best one everywhere. Japan is worse than Greece, and people don't even talk about it. And the U.S. actually has the biggest economy to support the debt. Now, the debt is still rising dramatically, and it's going to go exponential. But we're not the worst one out there. Europe is absolutely disaster, and I mean, our day's coming. But I think when gold will take off when they begin to realize that the debt is just going to take off quite dramatically. Now, I just put out a piece that's on our website about Greenspan. I mean, here you have the market crashing, and Greenspan on CNBC saying he thinks rates are going to go up, and he's like talking in the opposite direction. And people were like really confused about that. You know, what Greenspan is really saying bluntly is that interest rates will rise. Why? Because once people begin to realize that this debt is just going to continually come out and perpetually increase, as the capital will begin to shift, and where the major funds will begin to shift away from public debt, they're going to go into things like stocks and things of that nature that can absorb the money. And that would be a much better hedge for them than maybe physical gold. Because the physical gold could be turned over, but I don't think that they're going to be able to confiscate all the stock in the country. But I do think that at that point in time, you're going to see, as capital moves away from public debt into the private sectors, including equities, some real estate again, and gold, commodities in general. I think wheat's going to take off again. Then what you'll have is interest rates are going to start to rise. And the debts are really going to start to move up quite exponentially, and they've been artificially, the only real manipulation that the government's capable of doing is keeping the interest rates dirt cheap.
Right.
And because there they have the ability basically to, with an elastic money supply coming out of the Fed can make whatever money available that anybody wants. So they don't even have to print it. It's all electronic today.
Sure, it's a click of a mouse. So
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, but right now though, Martin, the Fed is buying 61%, or last year it bought 61% of all the U.S. government debt. Is that going to continue? Because that got to be inflationary, and how long is the world going to put up with that before they figure out that, hey, something's afoot here, and is that a way to ever prevent interest rates from finding their natural level based on risk of repayment?
Well, what you also have to realize, yes, that would be inflationary under a normal circumstance. But we are still in also a deflationary mode. And by what I mean that is that we have assets that are still contracting. Real estate, globally, assets are still contracting. Capital is leaving Europe, etc. So that's why you haven't seen inflation take off dramatically yet. Because on one hand, you have a tremendous amount of capital destruction from the deleveraging. And the Fed, although it has increased a lot, that hasn't exceeded the deleverage. Mm-hmm. So the two have been balancing off, but that's going to end, and then the assets will start to rise up again. Then, even if the Fed doesn't increase what it's been buying, it will be inflationary.
Right. So there's no way out here. Eventually, inflation is the result.
That's the ultimate end. There's definitely still going to be deflationary trends because they're trying to absorb and confiscate as much money, calling it taxes, etc. They pushed everything off for the lame duck Congress. So the budget committee that was supposed to come to an agreement, largely they haven't agreed on anything, and that will, in theory, come in January, and that's going to be automatically cutting. Now, it will probably end up cutting a lot more on the social side, which can create civil unrest. You also have the Bush tax cuts, which expire after the election. So everything's right for after this election.
It's rigged, huh?
And you're going to have to pay attention to that, because there you're looking at a tax rate going on investment from 15% to 40%.
Wow.
I mean, that's a huge increase. So you can still see some deflationary atmosphere from those types of things. But ultimately, when you come out the back end, I think the larger part will be inflationary, and that will pretty much take off from about 2014 into about 2017.
All right, so here's a question for you, Martin. Is there any place safe left in the world to either live or put your money, or both?
Well, I think what you have is a trend towards resigning American citizenship if you're American.
Yeah, sure.
And the primary reason people are doing that is that people don't realize that actually being American is not the best, it's actually the worst. Mm-hmm. We have worldwide income. If you were born in Zimbabwe, right, and you had parents that were American, and you never come back to this country, you still owe taxes here.
Yeah.
We are taxed according to your birth. And so you will always owe taxes simply because you're American. It's not this nonsense that they say, oh, they don't pay their fair share. Well, the government's idea of fair share is you're the property of the government.
Yeah, you're a milk cow. You're there to produce milk.
You got stamped on your ass in ultraviolet, property of the U.S. government. And so it's not a question of using services and paying your fair share. You don't get anything for it. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the world, Europe, etc., you pay taxes on what you earn in the country and what you're using. If you're British, for example, and you go off to Hong Kong, you pay taxes in Hong Kong. You don't pay taxes back to Britain.
What a novel concept, huh?
Yeah, you only pay for if you use it. And if you're not using it, why do you pay? But Americans, we're actually the property of government. And that's the way they look at everything.
You're depressing the hell out of me, Martin.
Sorry about that. But that's why you're seeing people resign. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a question of just picking up and saying, gee, okay, Singapore is a nice place to live. I'll go over there. You still got to send your checks back here.
Yeah.
You have to actually resign your American citizenship in order to be free. And that's a sad statement. Mm-hmm. But that's what's happening. That's why the number of people resigning their citizenships are like tenfold. And what the press also doesn't, say, like the guy from Facebook, oh, he's running there to get away from the taxes. They don't talk about that there's a 1/3 exit tax on everything you own. It's has nothing to do with income.
Yep.
So you paid your taxes on your income, and now they want 1/3 of the taxes just to leave the country.
Well,
New Jersey's now got that.
Yeah, I heard that.
If you lived here all your life, you sell your house, you want to go retire down in Florida, they go, oh, there's an exit tax now. Mm-hmm. You paid your taxes your whole life. Sorry, now you got to pay to leave. I mean, this is it's crazy, but this is the way governments happen. This is the direction we're going.
And also the other thing is that all these things turn out to be counterproductive, wealth destroying, and they drive the tax rate lower. It's kind of like the junkie getting that fix right now, but because his habit's going up so high, there won't be enough heroin on the street. He won't be able to go to his dealer he won't be able to afford enough heroin to keep the high going, and then the crash is going to come. And when you drive, just like what they're doing in France, driving out the wealth creators, although they drove them out a long time ago. So where do we go, Martin? I mean, where is it? South America?
Once you lose,
yeah,
it's hard to say. I would say you'd have to definitely, some of the Southeast Asian countries are better at this point. Some of the countries that were in the former communist bloc. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason I say this is because they don't have debts.
Right.
And it's the debt that's driving everybody crazy. Because what's happened here is, they promise all sorts of programs and pensions and this and that and the other thing, but nothing's funded.
Right.
So, the government gets very aggressive right now. Mm-hmm. Why? Because their theory is, well, they're not the problem, we're the problem. So therefore, if they could just get everybody to pay everything that they think everybody owes, that would solve the problem. But they would spend 10 times more anyhow.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately, we have to go down that route. That's the way all governments historically have gone until you reach civil unrest, as you're beginning to see, like in Southeast, in Southern Europe. Eventually, that's going to come here.
Yeah, in Chicago.
And they know that.
Yeah.
That's why they put in the bill to cut off the internet when they saw how the young Arabs were able to use Twitter and things like that to organize. They go, oh shit, we better get rid of that.
Yeah. It's
really... you don't cut down the entire internet because somebody's trying to infiltrate the CIA. You shut down their server.
You would think.
You don't kill the whole country.
You would think. But...
And also the whole country, the majority of the press, the real free press is on the internet now. It's not really it's why the newspapers are dying. The governments have controlled them for so long. It's very hard to find. You won't find any of the New York press ever come out and even tell the truth about the courts and how they can change transcripts and MF Global. And I mean, if this was in London, where the press was more independent, boy, they'd have Corzine's picture on the front page every day until he was indicted.
Yeah, amazing, huh?
But
amazing. Well,
the United States press is like, that would be unpatriotic. You do what we tell you to do, otherwise you're unpatriotic.
You will,
yes, sir. Okay.
You will obey. You will obey, Big Brother. So your book, Martin. When's that? I know we don't have a title yet. When's that due to be published?
John Wiley wants to get it out before the election. And I don't know the title yet because they're the ones that decide that.
Well, let me ask you, is it a book that the average Joe Sixpack can understand, or is it more esoteric that'll hopefully infiltrate the policymakers' brains and the financial controllers? Where are we with this?
No, it's a book largely for the common man. I don't write largely for the academics because nothing you're going to say for them is ever going to change their mind.
Yeah.
What this is largely when I had originally started trying to investigate the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. I found that largely every book that was out there, Galbraith, etc., they were all bogus. Galbraith had agendas, and he's talking about the corporations, and they took certain things, like saying that, the stocks were trading at 10 cents on the dollar for, and only very few stocks you could do that with, and the vast majority were not marginable at all. They completely omitted the fact that there was a sovereign debt crisis in 1931 where most of Europe defaulted, South America, China defaulted. So it's largely, I used contemporary newspaper sources. I've quoted directly the sources because I don't think anybody would honestly believe if I just said, well, this is what happened. So I felt I had to put together this book so that you could see what I saw. And I also put in a lot of, you can get Herbert Hoover's memoirs now. Originally, he did a great job with all the letters and documentation about what really happened with the sovereign debt crisis, et cetera, and he's the only one that even talked about it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, his work was extremely rare. He gave it to Macmillan, and he didn't want to be seen as making a profit from the Great Depression, so he told them they couldn't make any money. And so consequently, he printed 500 copies. That was it.
It was privatized, effectively, the book.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I understand why he did that, but on the other hand, he basically suppressed the truth about what really happened. And
has allowed FDR to go down as a hero as a result of it as well. And, there's so many stories. Most people alive today weren't alive during the Great Depression, and even their grandparents are gone. I remember my mother telling me stories like if you had a $100 bill during the Great Depression, you couldn't go into a supermarket or a bank and change it. It was too much money. They didn't have enough money. There was a real shortage of money, and as a result, a black market emerged where you'd change your $100 bill for $92 to $95, and that was how you got change. Amazing things like that, which are lost to history, it seems.
Yeah, because there were just so many bank failures. They don't. The sovereign debt crisis. What really. They like to blame the stock market, but quite frankly, the stock market fell from 29 into 1930, made it a traditional 60% decline. Mm-hmm. Nothing abnormal. It started rallying into early 31, and then all the governments default on their bonds. Mm-hmm. That's what takes the stock market down to zero. Yeah. To 10 cents on the dollar. Why? Because that destroyed the capital formation. Mm-hmm. That's where the majority of the banks defaulted. This money just vanished. They had sold a lot of the debt to the average individual. Right. So it wasn't a question of J.P. Morgan, being bailed out. They sold these things in small denominations, so moms and pops had them. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that all their whatever savings they had were wiped out. Wow. I remember when I was a kid, there always used to be, in the 70s, there'd be a group of little old ladies with signs protesting about lending money to foreign governments because their families were wiped out in the Great Depression. I'll never see them anymore because I don't think there anybody's still left.
Yeah, and that's the problem. The memory of it.
Yeah, so
it's gone.
When I started this book, I was flabbergasted at the real events that have not been told. Mm-hmm. So what I've done is I took actually the newspapers, and I'm quoting them verbatim. Here is what this said on this day. And it's the world economy. It's not just the United States. So,
yeah.
It's one of the things I point out, that every time there's a crisis, they have these investigations and they want to drag somebody out and blame them as if he created the entire world. They don't look at what happened outside the country, and they just do political grandstanding and say, oh, see, vote for us. We found the guy that did it, and this will never happen again.
Yeah, and here we are.
It happens all the time. What has the SEC ever prevented?
Yeah.
All they ever do is stand up and say, oh, we're going to lock up the guy that did it.
Yeah,
But they never prevent anything.
Mm-hmm. No, that's not their job. Their job is not to prevent, but it's to make people think that they're there to prevent. But on that note, Martin, we gotta wrap up. So, where's your site where people can read your work again?
ArmstrongEconomics.com.
All right. Hey, well, when the book comes out, we're definitely going to have you on again, talk about it. Reading a couple of pre-release things you sent me right now, and just keep up the great work. And together, hopefully, we'll educate the world so they'll really understand who's behind the curtain, who's pulling the levers, and who really doesn't have any power anyway.
Right. I think that's the key.
All right, Martin. Hey, we'll talk to you again soon. Be well.
All right. Thanks a lot.